Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we are still discussing in chapter 4 of our book, Post-Islamic Psychology, a Transcendent Model to Achieve Peace, Happiness and Success in the 21st Century. And we have discussed the whole idea of shaping process and how conditioning in terms of classical and operant conditioning affects our shaping process. All right, and we have discussed about how we can actually through shaping process create a wonderful ummah of excellence in the 21st century, and I have discussed that in the previous video. Today I'm going to discuss on the subtopic of anxiety, chapter 4. You go to this book, chapter 4. Chapter 4 was the fourth principle, holistic principles of human behavior and laws of learning. So all this involves the laws of learning, all right, which I have given to you quite a number of videos before that already. So how do we relate anxiety to our work in terms of post-Islamic psychology? Anxiety could be defined as emotional distress or uneasiness of the mind caused by the apprehension of danger or misfortune. So we have this inkling that we're going to get some sort of punishment, or it's going to get some sort of difficulties, or some sort of trauma, or some sort of fear, worry, and so on. Well, that definition describes anxiety in the human terms. But although less developed, all the same mental and emotional states exist at animal level. So animals too have anxiety. So that's why when you mistreat an animal, they have this anxiety. For example, there are a lot of experiments where they experiment with rats. They give you food pellet, as well as after the food pellet, randomly they give electric shock to the rats. They have anxiety whether to take the food or not to take the food. So this anxiety at the rat level can be extrapolated to a lot of parents. Later on I'll describe why children have neurosis and suicidal tendencies, all because of the wrong kind of parenting by parents, which actually creates a lot of anxiety in children at a very young age, especially those who are abused. The higher the consciousness of the animal, the closer to the human experience you will be. So if you have, for example, the apes, the chimpanzees, they have higher level of understanding in terms of social interaction. There is also this conflict of anxiety within the social structure, the alpha male and the females, and who are in the hierarchy and who is in the pecking order. So those at the lowest level, they become very depressed. All right, and you can see this in troops of monkeys and so on. They have done a lot of studies on that. Interestingly, like many things, anxiety can be beneficial in moderation. So sometimes a certain amount of anxiety, all right, can be useful in terms of motivation. A little bit of anxiety stimulates particularly efficient performance. So performance in relation to a certain amount of anxiety and achievement and performance, that is already documented. There's a lot of studies on that. Performance with a small amount of anxiety usually shows an improvement over performance with no anxiety at all. With a large amount of anxiety, performance drops below the level of performance with no anxiety. So if you have too much anxiety level, if you trace no anxiety versus performance, you can see that if there is no anxiety versus performance is low, no anxiety. But if there's small amount of anxiety, the performance go up. But too much anxiety, it goes down. While a small amount of anxiety seems to stimulate behavior, a large amount of anxiety seems to inhibit behavior. The level of anxiety can be so high that all behavior comes to a stop. So at a certain point, they freeze. Okay, so the animal I was telling you, the rats, after a certain point of this electrical shock, random shock, the rats would not want to take the food anymore, because it is hungry, it wants to take the food, but it doesn't know when it will be shocked. So it becomes very, very, I call it, at that point they are already not actually reacting well. So they are at that time, is already at the bordering, if we look at the human level, is bordering, okay, deep depression. It is correct that anxiety can be beneficial and stimulate behavior. From the relative point of view, this will be considered good. So we can say anxiety to a certain extent is good, but what about the philosophical and the holistic approach of human behavior that we are talking about? from the absolute perspective, anxiety is never good. So we do not want to create anxiety in ourselves, in our children, in our society also. Even though to a certain extent we know anxiety can be good, but there are other ways of stimulation and reinforcement. So why should we use a negative approach? Since the influence of anxiety is through the imposition of will by force. So we will by force to cause anxiety. So because of that, it is a very, very, in the long term, it is not good for society. Anxiety always involves the influence of some kind of negative control. It would be better if the improved performance came about from influence of positive factors. That means from internal motivation, inner speech, self-talk, which I have given you earlier on, and giving them the positive reinforcement. While there are many harmful effects from the use of negative means to condition behavior, there is one which outshadows all others. Every time conditioning by negative means is successful, it reinforces a response of using more negative means. Each successful use of negative control increases the use of negative control in the future. So this is a vicious cycle of downward cycle of using more and more negative control, and you can find this in totalitarian states. How they use the carrot and the stick, but initially it was a carrot, more carrot and the stick, and then it get more sticks and no carrots, because then the dictator and so on is fearful for their own, for his or her life, and they use imposition by mass execution. That's what happened to Stalin. He exiled millions of people, and maybe 30 to 40 million Russians died in the Soviet era of Stalin, out of hunger, out of gulag, out of torture, out of so many things. All right, but the initial idea of Marxism was good, because before that they have the Tsar and people are dying of hunger. So when they introduce a certain amount of socialism, people have food. All right, but beyond that, there were many other challenges within the state, and as a result, because of Marxism, they don't believe in God. Everything is just materialistic. So they have no conscience. They have no values. So they create anxiety in their society by what? By having secret police. So they will then spy on people. So if your level of anti-government activities is very high, then they send you to Siberia and then you die of hunger. As easy as that. So people disappears. All right, but this is where we have to understand what are the parameters in which we Muslims can develop a wholesome, holistic behavior for the 21st century using positive means. That's why we developed this whole idea of positive Islamic psychology, a transcendent model to achieve peace, happiness, and success in the 21st century, as a way forward of how we can shape our Muslim society and human society towards a globalized utopia. This is a vision, this is a mission, this is something that is very, very big. We're talking about an idealism, but we must have vision and mission in life. That means if we want to change the world, we must change ourselves, we must shape ourselves, we shape our family, our society, and then the world. So this is some ideas which Professor Muhammad Mahdi Jenkins have wrote down about how we want to shape society and why the imposition or the causes of anxiety by negative control is not on a long-term good. Now remember, sometimes parents has to use this kind of approach, but over the long term, we should reduce anxiety and have a world, what be a wonderful world without anxiety. Today, I just read a report of the number of suicides in America and in the Western world, and it is shocking. People are killing themselves at a far faster, especially the young teenagers. They are killing themselves. Why? Because they live in a society that causes a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure on them, and they are going into very deep depression. And that article really shocked me. So we have to do something. Anxiety will cause depression, and severe depression with suicide ideation will then causes a lot of unnecessary death of young, productive people who see no meaning, no purpose in life. So what is important is for us to give them a holistic worldview, a holistic behavior. That's why we have this approach of holistic human behavior, a total human being living internally at peace with himself and at peace with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and at peace with all the surroundings, creating a wonderful life this transient material life for 60 years, 70 or 100 years, and then traveling on to the realm of the permanent. That is what we call the akhirah. So in Islam, we should understand this, and inshallah, by understanding it, how negative reinforcement causes anxiety, we should minimize and minimize this approach and try to reduce within our family, our children, our parenting, that we reduce anxiety in our children, because if they are always anxious, they will then have this idea they are useless, and at a certain point they may commit suicide. This is what's happening, this epidemic of suicide that I'm telling you just right now. So inshallah, do something good and understand this whole concept of how negative control affects anxiety, and you can do more research and studies and see how a holistic lifestyle based on spiritual, emotional, mental and physical well-being, this holistic approach can reduce anxiety, and also how we can reduce anxiety in terms of Islamic parenting concepts, inshallah.